the seller doesn't have the option. They have to sell it to you. That's what a lease option is. And during that time, during that option period, you're leasing it from the seller. Now, one of my favorite quotes is from Nelson Rockefeller. He says, the secret to success is to own nothing, but control everything, right? So a lease option is the ultimate strategy that allows you to own nothing and control everything. And this is a time as we're coming into this changing in the market right now. You don't want to own anything. You don't want to own any debt. You don't want to own property. Who knows what's going to happen? Could go down, it could go up. And if it does, that's great because you've locked in a price because you have an option, right? But if it goes down, you don't want to be stuck with it. Make sense? Now, what are wholesaling lease options? This is the fast cash strategies. Well, once you get a property under contract with a seller as a lease option, instead of assigning your contract to an investor like a cash deal, like a wholesaling deal, you assign the contract to a tenant buyer. Your average profit on a wholesaling lease option deal is $3,000 to $10,000. It could be less, could be more. Now, sandwich lease options is your cash flow strategy, right? There's 3 profit centers in a sandwich lease option: cash now, cash flow, and cash later. This is where you stay in the middle and you make $30,000 plus because you're staying in the middle. You can make a lot more money because of the cash flow. You make $300 to $500 a month in cash flow, okay? Now, let's talk about win-wins and wins, win-win-wins. What are the advantages of lease options to sellers and buyers? Now, I say this is important because there's a lot of people out there that say, you know what, I don't, once you do a lease option, I don't care what tenant buyer you put in the house as long as they have enough money. In fact, I hope they don't buy the house so that I can get somebody else in there and make another, option deposit money. That's not I don't like that at all. I only want to do deals where I set up the seller to win, I set up the buyer to win, and of course, obviously, I win. And I've found in my business, when you look out for other people's interests, and then you help them win, then you will win practically almost every time. So why would a seller want to do a lease option? Why? What are some of the advantages to sellers? Maybe they're having a hard time selling their house. And this is going to be become very much more common going forward. Maybe they don't have enough equity. They're a little bit upside down. Even I read this like 3 or 4 months ago. In some parts of the country, 15 to 20% of all of the home loans out there have little to negative equity. Little to negative equity, 15 to 20% of some properties. So a seller, maybe they have another house, right? And now they have 2 mortgage payments to worry about. A lease option, you can help them remove that second mortgage from them, right? They get somebody in their house who wants to buy it, not a tenant who's going to call them every time the faucet leaks. They're going to put a tenant in there who wants to buy it, and it's going to take care of the maintenance and repairs, the daily maintenance and repairs. And as a lease option, the seller doesn't typically have to deal with the typical landlord headaches. And a lot of times they get to walk away with more money. Now, why would a tenant buyer want to do a lease option? What's the advantage to them? Well, they get to try a house out before they buy it. Maybe they get rent credits that go to reduce the price or go to their closing costs. Sometimes they get to work for equity so they can do their own repairs and get the carpet they want, the paint they want, the flooring, the cabinets. They can, I've done lots of these homes that need a ton of work, and I got flooded with phone calls, interest in those homes because they get to fix it up themselves. It would cost me 20 grand to rehab a house, and a tenant buyer can do it for 5 or 10. They get to lock in a price. It gives them time to rebuild their credit. And if they're just moving, this is huge, guys. You don't realize this. Somebody's just moving. They just are on the verge of getting a mortgage. What's the last thing they want to do? Live in an apartment for 6 months and then move again when they're ready to buy a house? So they can actually live in the house while they fix their credit, okay? And they don't have to move, which is really, really amazing. Now, here's an example wholesaling lease option deal. This was a nice house in the suburban area of St. Louis that I did. The seller had it listed as a for sale by owner. They moved out of town and they had 2 mortgage payments. The seller wanted $299. Market value was $300,000. Market rents were $1,800. Now they wanted $299. Market value was $300,000. I don't remember the exact number of what they owed, but it was like $270 or $280 or something like that. They did not have very much equity in it. But guess what? They moved out of town. They thought they could sell it faster than they could, and they couldn't. Now they've got 2 mortgage payments and they're motivated. So I offered the seller $290,000 and $1,800 a month for 2 years. And you say, what? The property's worth $300. You offered the seller $290? Yeah, as a lease option. I turned around and I advertised the property for $300,000, $1,800 a month in rent for 2 years. How did I come up with 300,000? Real simple. It took 290 that they wanted. I added $10,000 as my assignment fee, and I advertised the price for 300,000. I found a great tenant buyer. I assigned my contract to the tenant buyer for 10 grand, and I'm done. I was out of the deal. No commitments to pay the mortgage. And you know what that means? When I didn't tie up the property, so the seller, if they sold it before I did, they could cancel my contract and they didn't owe me anything, right? And I had no promises to start making rent at a certain time. I'm done and I'm out of the deal as soon as that tenant buyer moved in the house. Now, this tenant buyer in particular, he was a Muslim, and his mosque lent him the $10,000. Now, there are no banks that let you use your down payment from borrowed money, right? From borrowed funds. But it doesn't matter on a lease option. And this guy, he was in technology, and I forget his exact situation, but he had a bankruptcy like 5-6 years earlier, and he's just needed 1 or 2 years to be removed from it or something like that. But he was great. Okay, the mortgage broker said, yeah, he just needs a couple years to fix this and that, and he can get a good mortgage. And I'm done and I'm out of the deal. I don't even know if he ever did buy the house or not. The seller never called me back. Okay, here's an example deal that one of my students did. This is Bob in Portland, Oregon. The lead came from a seller on Craigslist. It was a for sale by owner. 9 months later, the seller contacted Bob again because Bob follows up like I teach. And he tried selling it with a realtor and as a for sale by owner, couldn't sell it. The seller was downsizing. They couldn't afford 2 payments. So Bob advertised, he got it under contract as a lease option, and he advertised it on Craigslist. He got tons of calls. He had a real simple ad: rent to own, classic, 2-story, 5-bedroom house, pets welcome, option fee, $7,900, blah, 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 blah. Credited towards a purchase price at closing. I don't want to get into the details, but that does not mean you're not promising that they're going to get it towards their down payment. You might be able to, but it depends on the mortgage broker. But it will at least reduce the price of the home. All right. Anyway, nice house. Look at the pictures here, nice median priced home, good suburban neighborhood. He got a lot of calls on this. This is amazing. You put a sign in the yard, rent to own, 3% moves you in, phone number. He actually advertised his option fee that he was trying to get, or assignment fee of $7,900. He found a lot of people with large down payments, and he built up his tenant buyer list for future deals. He found a buyer within 7 days. Excuse me. And he used an attorney and escrow company to handle all the paperwork and the legal issues. So Bob then assigned his contract to the buyer. Here's how the numbers worked. Sorry, I gotta take something to drink here. The seller had it listed for $294 because they owed about $285. So Bob wanted an assignment fee of $7,900. So he took what the seller owed plus $7,900 to come up with a price of $292,900. That was the option price. He did not do rent credits. The market rents were $1,950 a month. That covered the seller's mortgage payment. So he turned around and advertised it for $292,900 and $1,950 a month in rent. Within 7 days, he found somebody that wanted the deal, and he made a $7,900 option deposit fee on that property. Okay, super simple. Now we're talking about nice houses and nice neighborhoods, okay? Which house would you rather wholesale? Which house would you rather rehab? Which house would you rather rent? Which house would you rather own? So what if I told you it's actually easier to make money on this house on the right than it is this house on the left? Now, obviously you can wholesale this thing, right? Which house would be easier to, I don't know, borrow money from a bank to lend on? Like, obviously this house. Which house do you think is going to get you better tenants, better tenant buyers? Let's say you fix this house up here on the left, right? That tenant buyer you put in there, which tenant buyer is going to be more likely to buy the house? The tenant buyer living in this one or the tenant buyer living in this one? So here's, guys, there's a lot of money to be made on the nicer homes and very little competition on these homes. And if you're a wholesaler who only knows how to make cash offers, you might be able to buy this house for 60 cents on the dollar. Do you think you're going to buy this house here on the right for 60 cents on the dollar? No, you're not, unless it's maybe a short sale foreclosure from the bank. You understand what I'm saying? You can make just as much money, if not more, with this house on the right. Okay, what about cash flow? without actually buying a house, sandwich lease options. I'm not going to cover this much right now because I want you guys to focus on quick nickels rather than slow dimes right now in this market. So, now may not be the good time to do sandwich lease options. You certainly can if you get a sweet deal. But I just want to walk through one example here, and I'm going to skip another 2 or 3 slides after this. But I'll go through it. I'll cover it here. Now, remember, in a sandwich lease option, there's 3 profit centers, right? Cash now, cash flow, cash later. Remember that. In a sandwich lease option, there's cash now, cash flow, cash later. And this example deal here from Brian, I want you to tell me, I want you to type this in the Q&A box or the chat box, whatever it is, what the cash now is, what the cash flow is, and what the cash later is, okay? So I contracted this property, he said. This is a deal that Brian did. I contracted on a property for $270,000 on a 5-year lease option with 0 down and a monthly payment of $1,600. All right. I found a tenant buyer that gave me $10,000 non-refundable deposit. So what's the cash now? With a monthly payment of $1,950. So what's the cash flow? We had a purchase price of $319,900. What's the cash later? So go ahead and type that in. What's the cash now? What's the cash flow? And what's the cash later? This is a really, really simple sandwich lease option deal right here. He says they signed a lease option for a term of 1 year. It was a for sale by owner on Zillow. And if all you guys are wondering if this really works, the answer is yes. The total profit on this deal is going to be about 54 grand. So I'm going to look at your questions, comments here in the chat box. Good, you guys are getting it. 10 grand now. Yep, $350 a month cash flow. Good. How much cash later? Boom, there you go. No, cash later is not 54. It's the difference between 319 and 270. Okay, so that's about 50 grand. Yeah, you guys got it. 49 grand later. That's it. That's a sandwich lease option deal. Now listen, if that tenant buyer doesn't buy the house and they walk away, is that $10,000 refundable? No, it's not. How much money did Brian put down in this house? 0. Did this seller do a credit check on him? I know the answer. It's no. Wow, do you see how powerful this strategy is? This is control without ownership. He's controlling this property. He's going to make 50 grand on this deal. And did he go to a bank? Did he use any of his own money? No, he didn't. This is a beautiful thing. Now, what if he would have given the seller $1,000 down? Would that have come out of his own pocket? No, it would have come from this $10,000 option deposit money. All right, this tenant buyer has 1 year. What if they can't buy it in 1 year? Well, he might give them another year. He might give them another year after that. What if they can't buy it? Well, you still got 2 years left because it's a 5-year lease option with the seller. All right, so this is such a good deal. I'm going to move on here. George, $800 a month cash flow on his first 2 deals. Eric, he's going to net around 48 grand on his lease option, sandwich lease option, about $300 per month. Corey, 4 lease option deals in the last 10 months. Super cool story. One of the things that he's doing that I love is he's sending letters, because he's not a realtor, but he's sending letters to older listed properties on the MLS. I want to talk real quick about small towns and junker properties. This is one of my students. I love this story. It's a small town out in small town, Alabama. That's not the actual house, but it was a house that needed a lot of cosmetic work. There's only about $15,000 spread on the deal because the seller absolutely refused to go below a certain price. So he was throwing away a lot of wholesalers' offers. So Marty said, well, you know what? What if I can get you that price? Would you be willing to lease it to me for like 5 years and then sell it to me for that price? And the seller said, yeah, sure. I mean, you'll take care of it. You'll fix it up. Yeah, I'll fix it up. No big deal. All right. How does that work? Marty said, well, this is the way it's going to work. I'll give you the price you want if you give me the terms I want. Okay, great. I need to keep 100% of the rent for the first 2 years. She's getting $900 a month cash flow for 24 months. And then the next 3 years, we'll split the rent 50-50. Okay, great. Signed the contract with the seller. She stuck a handyman special sign, rent to own, in the yard, found a buyer as she was putting in the sign, and getting $900 a month cash flow. That's like 20 grand, I think, the first 2 years. And then another 25 grand, 20 grand or so in the next 3 years, and just a little bit of equity. And the tenant buyer was a electrical contractor And they loved the idea of being able to go in there and fix the house up and make it look like the way they wanted it to look. Okay? Small town, junker property that needed a lot of work. Now, let me ask you some questions. Did Marty put any money down on this house? No. Did Marty go out and get a loan and buy the house? Nope. Did she take over the seller's mortgage? Nope. Did she do owner financing? Nope. Did she do any of the work to fix it up herself? Nope. Tenant buyer fixed it up. Now in exchange, this is an interesting story too. In exchange, because there was a lot of work that needed to be done, she didn't even require an option deposit from the tenant buyer to move in because there was so much work that needed to be done. But she's getting $900 a month cash flow on this deal. Beautiful. How about this? Did you know you could use a lease option to buy your own dream house? Now, again, just in the interest of time, I normally tell this story about Carl, but I'm going to go through this fast. This was a property out in a nice area of Alabama. He negotiated with the seller 5 years, 0 down, no credit check. He negotiated a $1,000 rent credit. Every month he paid his rent on time, and after 5 years, he's going to have over $140,000 in equity on this house. And he solved 2 problems. He helped the seller who was worried about making another mortgage payment, and his wife wanted a house in that nice neighborhood, and they couldn't get a mortgage right away because she was, I think she was a school teacher, and he was self-employed, a realtor and investor. They made enough money, but they didn't have enough taxable income to qualify for a jumbo mortgage. And but they could easily afford this house. They just needed to get about at least 2 years of tax returns to be able to get a good mortgage. And yeah, lease optioning this beautiful house in a great neighborhood. Now, I'm going to talk about, like, we have 2 houses. I've done this before on my cell phone. The first one, seller called, hey, I want to sell my house, and they owed too much. And I said, well, you know, would you be open to maybe leasing it for a year and then selling it? He said, yeah, sure. I said, what's the address? I looked it up, and I said, holy smokes, it's a nice house. He said, yeah. I said, why haven't you sold it yet? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, what's going on? I'm sure you got like a lot of time. You can just wait. And he said, no, we already bought another house. I'm really worried. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, how many months I can make the second mortgage payments. And I said, well, I think I might already have a good tenant buyer for you. And he said, yeah, who? I said, me. This is a beautiful house. So I showed my wife. We loved it. It was on a cul-de-sac, beautiful suburban area, nice big backyard. It's like a 4,000 square foot house, a finished walkout basement. It was really nice. We lived in it for 2 years and decided we didn't want to buy it. And by the way, how much money did we put down? None. Did the seller look up and pull up my credit? Nope. And we decided, you know what, we don't want to buy this. So we went, I think this is when we went to Europe for 3 months. Yes. So we just moved out. We actually helped him sell it because I was licensed, or I had an assistant that was licensed, and we just waived our commissions. But when I got back from Europe, I thought, you know what? I was at this point in my life. This was five years ago or so. I was not at a point where I could actually get a jumbo mortgage, like a big jumbo mortgage, because I could afford it, but I didn't have the credit because I still had some things from like 7 years ago, and I didn't have enough tax returns for income for tax returns, you know, to qualify for a big jumbo loan. And so I found this beautiful house on Zillow, and I texted the seller, and I said, hey, this is a nice house. I said, and it needed a little bit of work. And this is only, it's on 3 acres, and it's only about 20